The day was unusually warm for the middle of October. My girlfriend Christine wanted to go to the lake and get in a little extra summertime fun while we had the opportunity. After all, it was the middle of the semester and we could all benefit from a little de-stressing. I called up our best friends, Kat and Brandon, and told them the plan, much to their excitement. "We'll come pick you guys up in an hour. Bring your flippers." Chris and I got to their apartment a little early, but it didn't matter. We were all ready to go enjoy ourselves, forget about our problems for a while. The lake was a short drive away, one we had taken so many times before. I knew the route like the back of my hand, but for some reason I couldn't shake this uneasy feeling. We came to a red light and another driver was stopped next to us, some kind of SUV with a shitty done-at-home paint job and duct tape holding the passenger mirror on. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the passenger in the front seat just staring at me. She was crying, obviously upset over something. I was about to look away. I didn't want to be rude, but then I saw it. Just behind the head of her seat was what looked like the barrel of a gun. I didn't turn my head away. Talking in something of a whisper, I said to my car full of friends, "Guys, I think something is wrong." Chris and the others all looked at once, drawing the attention of the passenger. She looked at all of us with tears running down her face. She mouthed what looked like, "Help me." Bad idea. The driver turned to see what was going on. He stared me in the eye and turned to say something to the guy in the back. The woman started to freak out and the unease in my gut grew into a ball of ice. All of us were getting nervous until a honk from behind us shook me back to attention. The light had turned green. Chris shouted out from the passenger seat, "Go, just drive." So I did, hauled ass away from that shitty SUV, not looking back. No one said anything for a while until Brandon broke the silence. "So are we not going to talk about what just happened? I mean, did we just witness a freaking kidnapping or was somebody just screwing around?" Chris piped up to answer before I had a chance. "Of course it was someone screwing around. When's the last time you heard of a kidnapping around here?" "Probably just some other college kids trying to scare the hell out of whoever." Kat cut her off. "But what about the gun?" She was obviously freaked out. "And that guy driving, he looked like he was in his 40s. He definitely wasn't a college student." I didn't want to hear this because, truthfully, I was freaking out a little bit inside too. What if it was a kidnapping? What if we just doomed somebody to death? No way something like that would happen around here. I'm sure Chris is right, just some people messing with us. Don't worry about it, we'll be at the lake in a few minutes. I'm sure we'll forget all about this little prank. I was trying to be reassuring. I'm not sure I even fully believed it myself. I turned up the radio and we drove the rest of the way to the lake, not really talking. Once we got there, it was only a few minutes before we all shrugged off the incident and began to enjoy ourselves. It was probably the last time after all, at least until next summer. We spent all day out there screwing around in the water, getting high, and just having fun. By the time we were ready to leave, it was almost dark out, and all thoughts of what had happened earlier were put to bed under a blanket of fond memories. Until, that is, we got back to the car. Someone had keyed into the driver door the words, "Keep your mouth shut." I was pissed and freaked out at the same time. Who else would have done this but those people? Brandon started to lose it, yelling out, "Son of a bitch, this is too far for a prank. We have to go to the police or something. I'm too young to be murdered by some asshole in a Durango." I grabbed his shoulder, hoping to calm him down, telling him, "It's okay. Let's just get out of here and we'll deal with it tomorrow. You and Kat can stay with us tonight if you're worried." Everyone seemed content to leave, so we did. I tried to keep my cool, but I didn't sleep at all that night. Listening for every little sound, but hearing nothing. The next day, I took Brandon and Kat home early so they could make their classes on time. They were both a little shaken up, but seemed mostly fine. I got back to my apartment and found Chris on the couch, transfixed on the 11 a.m. news. I looked to the screen and immediately saw why. Local woman, 29-year-old Jennifer Lord, was kidnapped yesterday. Taken from her home, her husband murdered. There were no eyewitnesses to the crime, and the police had no current leads. The picture of the woman staring back at me on the screen was the same woman we had seen yesterday. I called Brandon as fast as I could, my hands shaking. Chris was just repeating "no" over and over. Brandon answered his phone, freaking out, barely able to form a sentence. He and Kat had seen the news already. Panicking, we decided to meet up at the park and figure out what the hell we should do. After what felt like hours and several missed classes, we all agreed we would keep our mouths shut. None of us wanted to run the risk of being the next one taken. It may have been selfish, but it seemed to us the only safe option. We all went home, and for a month we barely spoke a word to each other. Maybe too afraid, or maybe too ashamed. Whatever it was, it drove a wedge between the four of us. Brandon and Kat split up, and Chris went home for Thanksgiving, and she didn't come back. By the end of November, we may as well have been strangers. I didn't hear from any of them for weeks, up until the end of January when I got a call from Kat. It was weird hearing her voice after so long, but I had missed it. I missed all my friends. I missed Christine. But this was no call for reminiscing. She told me that Brandon had been talking to her for about a week, being paranoid about feeling like he was being watched, followed, being stalked. Up until 3 days before when he just stopped communicating altogether. It wasn't like him to cut someone off without at least saying why, but at this point, who knew? I asked if she had heard from Chris, but she hadn't responded to any of Kat's calls or texts. I started to worry myself. I told Kat to come over and that we'd talk about things, decide if we should really be worried or not. About an hour went by and I got a text. It was Kat. "Come outside, we'll go for a walk and talk." Kat didn't usually go for that kind of thing, but I assumed she just needed some air. I grabbed my jacket and headed out to the parking lot, but Kat wasn't there. I texted her, "Where are you?" "Come around back." Something felt wrong, maybe just nerves about seeing Kat again. I walked to the back of the building, still no Kat. I called out to her, "Kat!" No response. I looked around the dark lot for any sign of her, but what I actually saw made me freeze where I stood. There in the back corner was a dark SUV, something reflecting the light differently off the passenger mirror. Duct tape. My phone buzzed and I looked down to see a message from Kat. "Behind you!" I spun around in time to see a dark mass swing a shovel at me. I hit the ground, life spinning around me. In my last lucid moments, I saw a phone drop next to me. Kat's phone, covered in blood. And then everything went black. When I woke up, I found I couldn't move. Tied to a chair, my mouth taped shut. I was disoriented and scared. I had no idea where I was or how I got here, but I knew I had to get out. As I began to regain my bearings, I realized I wasn't alone. Around me were two other chairs, people tied to both of them. Oh God, Chris and Kat were both there, trapped in this place with me. They were looking at each other, crying, struggling against the restraints. I realized what was missing. Brandon was nowhere to be found. I locked eyes with Chris, sharing a look of mutual understanding and dread. I started looking around the room everywhere I could, trying to find a way out. We were in some old, dilapidated house that I had never seen before, and as I searched the room, my gaze stopped on the table next to us. In the dim, dull light of the single lamp, a number of sharp implements as well as a baseball bat and a big, rusty sledgehammer were visible. I cried out for help to no avail. We were stuck here with some psycho, and no one was coming to help. A door to the other room opened, and a masked entity walked through, sparking muffled screams and cries from us all, and set a box on the table with a dull, heavy thud. They were smaller than the guy who was driving that day. It must have been whoever was holding the gun in the back seat. I didn't want to stick around and find out what was inside of that box. Quickly and quietly, I began working at the knot tying my wrists behind me as the figure began to open the box. Reaching in, they began pulling something out, something heavy. All Kat needed to see was the tangled auburn hair gripped between the figure's fingers like a handle. She cried out behind her taped mouth, a sound of pain and sheer horror as the figure pulled out Brandon's severed head. His mouth frozen open in a permanent scream. Kat was crying and screaming uncontrollably, her duct tape coming loose now. Between her cries, she screamed out in anger, "You son of a bitch, no!" Chris was fighting with her restraints, screaming, but I couldn't take my eyes off my best friend. Now nothing more than a head. My stomach churned hard and I threw up, hard enough to loosen the tape from my mouth. The figure just stood there, watching us from behind her mask, taking in our pain, it seemed, enjoying it. I grabbed the sledgehammer, and one slightly labored swing smashed Brandon's head like a pumpkin, sending his blood and brains splashing all over the three of us. As I sat paralyzed by the shock of what had just happened, the figure dropped the heavy hammer to the ground and grabbed the baseball bat, moving menacingly around the table, stepping close to Chris, who was now sitting unconscious. "No, don't you dare. We kept our mouths shut. We never told anyone what we saw. Why are you doing this to us?" The shape ignored me, and as I screamed out, they whacked Chris in the head hard with the bat, knocking her chair to the ground, her head bouncing off the floor. She wasn't moving, and all I could think was, she's dead. The figure kept swinging, beating the still body with the bat, me screaming at the top of my lungs, and Kat silently crying, staring at the vomit and blood-covered floor. By the time the creep was finished, the bloody, beaten body in front of me was completely unrecognizable as my girlfriend. Just some faceless lump bleeding into the hardwood floors. If she wasn't dead before, she certainly was now. As I struggled, screaming at the bastard and sobbing harder than I ever had, the figure stepped over to Kat, pulling her face up to look her in the eyes. She was already long gone. Her eyes empty and her face blank. The killer picked up a knife from the table and simply slashed Kat's throat. I couldn't make her feel any more pain than witnessing all this had caused her. Oh God, I thought. It's my turn. The time had come. With all my strength, I yanked my wrist through the loosest of the two loops, freeing myself despite quite possibly breaking my wrist. As the killer whipped around and lunged for them, hands outstretched, only to fall face first into the ground. My feet, oh my God, my feet are still tied. How could I be so stupid? This was it. A feeling of dread swept over me like a flood. My one chance to save myself, gone. Freedom was inches from my fingers, and in my haste, I had taken it all away from myself. I felt the killer's hand grab my shoulder as they flipped me over, quickly sitting on my chest. Grabbing my throat with one hand, the killer began beating my face with the other. I was growing more and more discombobulated with every blow, my vision clouding and my face filling with blood. All at once, the beating stopped, the pressure leaving my chest. No sooner than I had begun to catch my breath, it was taken sharply from me as the killer's knife was plunged into my gut. An intense, burning sensation like I had never felt before flooded my body as I felt myself fail to scream. The killer stood over me, the sledgehammer from before clutched in their hand, dragging on the ground. As I lay there, bleeding and beaten, the only thing I felt now was doom. Why were they doing this? I had to realize we didn't go to the cops. We didn't tell anyone. It just wasn't right. I could feel the icy hands of death coming for me with every step this monster took towards me, clutching their bloodied sledgehammer in both hands. Please, please, I whimpered. I swear to God we didn't tell anyone. We didn't do anything. Please. They looked down at me writhing on the ground, gasping for air through the blood gurgling from my throat. They knelt down close to me, and with a voice as cold as ice and sharp as a dagger, whispered in my ear, "You should have." The figure stood up, pulling off the ski mask, and revealed the now rage-twisted face of Jennifer Lord. The warm blood trickling across my face faded into numbness and shock. She sounded so angry and so triumphant. After months of torment, I finally found the opportunity I needed, she explained to me. I took one of their guns, and I didn't hesitate to kill them both. That wasn't enough. I wanted revenge on you and your bastard friends. You saw me, you could have helped me, but you didn't. All you were worried about was saving yourselves. And now you know what it means to be helpless, to face down death. The only difference is, you won't come out on top. As she lifted the hammer over her head, all I could muster was a weak, tear and blood-choked, "I'm sorry." Those were the last words I ever said.